Hi there. There's something which really sparked my interest in that amazing new Netflix series, The Queen's Gambit. And this is in episode 5 actually. Beth comes over and is asked about a certain position. And she mentioned about using the knight, not a pawn. And I believe the game can be identified as Mikhail Tal against Vladimir Borisovich Turkmakov, played in the Moscow tournament of 1971. Now, there is something fascinating about this game, so let me show you it. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, and Tal castled, bishop e7, rook e1, b5. So Ruy Lopez territory, and we get soon a familiar looking position from the film, which, well, there was only a glance at it in the film, but we have this structure where white plays d takes c5, and there's an outpost strategy on d5 in this particular way of playing against Ruy Lopez, where black also has a corresponding outpost square on d3. And fans of Michael Steen's Simple Chess will know that there's a classic example in that book, again, of a Mikhail Tal game against Bronstein. So we have a situation of competing knight outposts, d3 versus d5. We see bishop e6, queen e2, queen c7, and here is a critical moment. And in the game against Turkmakov, Tal actually played a pawn move, and I think this is what they were alluding to, what Kasparov is representing. There was a pawn move, and it actually, let's see how that worked out. But there is an idea here of using the knight outpost not for a long-term entrenched knight, but rather a kind of boost in piece activity, liberating in particular, for example, this bishop is dangerous across this diagonal. You get the ferocity of the bishops by making use of knight d5 here. And it also opens up the ferocity of the pieces on the e file for e5. So after knight takes, e takes, bishop takes, you can see that white's pieces have essentially been liberated. These bishops, the pressure on e5, the frontal pressure, it's a liberation type knight move. So it's very interesting that Garry Kasparov has drawn attention to this kind of temporary usage of a knight outpost. This is not a Steinitzian accumulating advantage for the long term. This is a real boost in piece activity, and which is immediately tapped into with knight takes e5. And this position after queen d1, this is a very nifty move, would mean that white should be okay. There could be this tactic here, a desperado kind of tactic, but a counter desperado, knight takes c4, and we'd end up with black being fine. Actually, it's nothing really to write home about in this particular situation. And I thought for some time I wasn't going to go over this. I thought, what is of interest here? Black's actually technically slightly better. What was Kasparov's point? And I have to say, I think he might have been alluding to the Tal against Bronstein game. However, I did discover something interesting in the way Tal played it with g4. And, this is interesting recently, because if we revisit these historical games with the latest technology we have, like Stockfish NN, there are interesting, remarkable findings to be had. On g4, in the game, Tal against Turkmakov, bishop c5, g5, we had Tal seemingly doing something quite dangerous, opening up this semi-open g-file. And after king h1, it looks kind of as if this is quite dangerous. Bishop takes, gives up the dark square bishop. So this is a bishop without a counterpart, which I love emphasizing recently because of my experience of Stoffley's. I'm really impressed with what it can do with a bishop without a counterpart. And it turns out that in the game continuation, there is something really special that could have been done on the dark squares. We have this game continuation where it seems black is quite dominant as well, making great use of the semi-open c-file and the c4 outpost. So surely this attack, there was adequate defensive resource. So Tal played a4, and we see a takes, f4, and we see bishop b7. And it seems as though, well, black's pieces are actually really quite good here. It looks as though white's centre is under fire. F takes, but bear with this for a moment. Queen takes, knight takes e5, rook a7, and we see rook d7. And the interesting thing here is the dark square bishop without a counterpart. This really comes into, to be honest, I find it comes into any study of even pawn structures, even the dynamic pawn structures. Often this is one factor which is underestimated when we study different pawn structures, the bishop without a counterpart. And here, actually, after bishop e3, rook c8, Tal played bishop d4, and this is quite a mighty bishop in the centre. And we have knight c6, and here we have the move bishop g4. So bear with this. Very tactical situation. Knight takes a7 is played. Bishop takes d7. Rook c7. And in this position, there is an absolutely remarkable finding I'm happy to report to you in this position. Tal played bishop takes a7, which is a bad mistake, it seems. It led to equality. So basically, after bishop takes a7 at move 37, we have this check, and the bishop isn't that painful on d4 here. It's not pinning anything. And the game was agreed drawn here, and I don't like covering draws. So it seems, though, there is something really, really interesting instead in this position. I wonder if you can guess it if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. It really does celebrate the dark square bishop without a counterpart, and this absolute pin against the knight against the king. When it's against the king, it's an absolute pin, not a relative pin. Guess what white could have actually played here, which seems to offer a quite a significant advantage. So if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, white to play, what would you play here instead of bishop takes a7? If I tell you there's something remarkable. Okay, rook d1. Yeah, rook d1. The magic here is rook d1. If knight c6, then taking. And it turns out this pin against f6 is potentially fatal. It's not, the king's not going anywhere. Black's pieces are frozen. And in fact, the white king can march to g5. And I have to say sorry to Garry Kasparov if he ever sees this video, if he didn't intend this at all, but it has triggered this investigation for me of this Tutmakov game. But it seems as though the king can get to g5. So maybe Kasparov is thinking, oh, this king's crosser is a real super nerd. I didn't even mean this. But yeah, the king comes to g5 and Tal could have won this game. Winning position. You know, there's no h-pawn to stop the king coming to g5. Yeah, rook d1 seems to be a winning position. If rook takes d7, we just play bishop takes f6, and then we're like the exchange up. It seems as though this bishop without a counterpart is a major asset after rook d1, pinning that knight absolutely to the king, giving white time to really exploit that pin now. You know, please let me know what you find. What you think of this. I just thought it was an interesting finding, to be honest. So yeah, in the game it did fizzle to a draw, and it, you know, maybe there's something to be said about outposts, but they say, you know, chess is, you know, Teichmann says, you know, chess is 99% tactics. A lot of people think maybe not so much, maybe more than 90%. But when you've got bishops without counterparts, the magic of tactics, it seems to be more easy to conjure up, should we say. Now, I'd like to show you in the next part of this video the classic game, which I'd hoped was the position, but it doesn't seem to be. And you have to go over this knight d5 when it can be super effective. So there is another part coming up. I'm just getting ready. Back with you in a moment. Okay, now this example, just to show this knight d5 outpost idea as a way of quickly liberating pieces in such a way that it's so sudden the liberation, the opponent can't really do anything about it. So Mikhail Tal against David Bronstein, 1959 USSR Championship round 12. So we see a similar pawn structure from the Ruy Lopez. We see this c3, this build-up, and we see d4, and we see this idea of d takes c5. So we have this kind of competing outpost situation where white has the possibility of knight d5, and off the knight g5 here, okay, we see that there's dark square weaknesses which have been provoked there. Knight, and now a4, king g7, a takes, rook b1, knight a5, we see knight f3, queen c7, and it's here in this game where the magic of liberation, using that outpost to sort of open up, liberate quite a few pieces. The bishop, the classic Ruy Lopez bishop, this one, this e file against e5, it's all liberated after knight d5 and with tempo hitting the queen. So maybe Bronstein had underestimated this. On g4 here, yeah, it doesn't make sense, it seems, because of b4. And, you know, after g5, you know, black just plays knight h5 and is absolutely fine. You know, white's just weak in f4. But knight d5 here, from a liberational perspective, is really fascinating. We see bishop takes, e takes. So we've got pressure on e5. This bishop's opened up. This bishop's opened up. Highly liberational kind of use of an outpost. And to be honest, I was uncomfortable with it because I prefer my knight outposts to be there accumulating advantages, you know, the Steinitzian philosophy of using structural aspects as a kind of storage device where you accumulate advantages, and later, like 30 moves later, they build up until it's irresistible. But this use of an outpost is entirely legitimate to kind of, you know, explode the power of the pieces. And we see even after the queens come off in this Tal game, the pieces are at full pelt here. So much so that there's an amazing idea that Tal tapped into after rook a1. He gave up his light square bishop, but now can you see what Mikhail Tal played if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video? So this is Tal against Bronstein, 1959, round 12, classic encounter. Okay, bishop h6. You may have seen this before. So king g8 was played because if king takes h6, white takes on f7, takes on d8, and plays actually rook a5. And this is kind of difficult for black, this position, because the pawns are kind of, if b4, you know, well, you know, there's things like c4, and if the knight moves, rook takes e7. And if here, you know, losing both pawns is bad because that's two connected passed pawns, and white is doing actually quite well there. So king g8 was played instead, and we see knight c6, and we get a situation where there's an uncomfortable pin of a different sort, but a relative pin. It's not to the king. So a relative pin, uncomfortable pin here, and this bishop does have the counterpart, but it's pinned. White's taking out b5. And this looks as though the bishop might be in trouble, but Tal's got this in hand with soon this and taking, and now h4 to release that bishop, leading to a great position now after f4. Really, this bishop's going to be released whether black likes it or not. We see check, g takes, rook b5, rook c8, f5 check, king d6, because if king takes f5, white uses the bishop for bishop e3 and wins material. So king d6, and we see b4, and taking here just in time because the dark square bishop is the hero here after bishop f4 check, picking up that pawn before it can queen. So I might have got this completely wrong, gone off the deep end with this investigation, but it just didn't seem as though this was an entirely exotic first example game. Anyway, the implications for me, it's interesting if Kasparov has read Simple Chess, Steen, and was kind of alluding to that idea of the knight d5. At least part of Beth's culture for the game. She's learning how Mikhail Tal played, the influence of Mikhail Tal, dynamic ways of approaching the position, not just a classic accumulation of advantages from the outpost, but the kind of dynamic liberation of the pieces as a prelude to tactical combination. So maybe that's what he was actually alluding when he's showing Beth's understanding of knight d5. But yeah, there's a historical point here in that original Tal game. There was a winning opportunity. I'd be delighted to find out if Kasparov was aware or not of that resource. It was with Stockfish NN, not my credit, Stockfish NN. I'll be delighted to find out if someone's gone over that game and seen that resource before in the original Tal game. So it turns out there was a winning opportunity even after Tal's move g4. But yeah, the knight d5 is the more classic exploitation sometimes of the outpost in that Ruy Lopez structure, just to liberate the pieces for an immediate combinational punishment. I think it's a more of a temporal gain, smaller window opportunity to exploit it. So fascinating stuff. I probably nerded most of you out. Okay. Yeah, but it's a hot topic at the moment, this Netflix series. If you haven't seen it, you must see it. I might even do a video about the Queen's Gambit. What is the Queen's Gambit? And a few traps there. So please let me know. We could do a recap video on that. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes, all appreciated. If you want to invite me for a game, King's Crusher TV/Chessworld. If you register at Chessworld, I'll be able to invite you for a game soon after. Check out my tactics course. It's doing well. It's got great reviews. A lot of people are using it now, improving their game tactically. Tactics are very, very important in chess, as these examples show. So King's Crusher TV/Chess Tactics, and check out London System, King's Crusher TV/London System. Okay, there's also, King's Crusher TV/Opening Tango as well to check out. So I hope you have fun with those. There are discount codes attached to those. So check that out for that discount on those courses. Thanks very much. Cheers then.